Hello and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guild House. This is again a weekly podcast. I've been doing this long enough, where I, Matthew Whitby, sit down with people all across the D&D or tabletop RPG space and just chat about things. This week I'm overjoyed to be joined by Mellanie Black. Thank you so much for taking the time.
That's perfectly all right. Hello.
No, I was going to say this is excited because technically this is our second time being on a podcast together because we were on the Albacon.
Yeah, it was a panel.
Yeah, which
is much less pressure. There were several people. That was just the two of us.
You feel like you're just by sitting there nodding sagely, you're contributing. Yeah. But us nodding back and forth for an hour probably doesn't sit as well.
I would watch that.
Yeah, no, fair. No, it's
soothing content for 2020.
We're eating into the bobblehead market.
Yeah.
But no, so I guess the people listening then, who maybe aren't aware of some of the things that you've kind of contributed to or you've been involved in. What are like some of the products? What are some of what are you sort of known for?
Well, what I'm known for and what I've done may not be the same thing. So I guess the sort of biggest profile things I've been involved in, my sort of first ever product was I had an adventure in the first volume of Uncaged anthology, which is a bit of a baptism by fire. And then since then, I've kind of been really lucky and in many ways to be part of like some really amazing collaborations and sort of providing content for them. So I was in the Seasons anthology. I was in... There is a thread on my Twitter. There is a lot of stuff on there. I just can't remember off the top of my head. But I guess, so there's a lot of pseudo-political stuff in there, which some people like and some people don't. But yeah, I guess that's what I do, is a lot of collaborations with awesome people that mean I sort of, first of all, kind of get the uplift of all those amazing people being around me, and also I don't have to learn to do everything, which is quite nice. I am trying to learn to do everything, but it's not a prerequisite for me to get stuff out there, which is nice.
I mean, I think that's why there's sometimes for people trying to get their foot in the door, anthologies do kind of seem like a very sort of a safe space where, like, obviously prior to starting things like the RPGs Writer Workshop or things like that, just sort of starting on your own with the list of layout, as it's a lot. It's spinning and they're vastly different skill sets.
They are, yeah.
So do you think that kind of was the perfect start for you to be within an anthology?
Yeah. So the only thing that I'd ever produced for any kind of tabletop was my own homebrew stuff, which I think produced is a very, it's overstating it, because I was just making it up in front of my friends as I went along, and then frantically taking notes afterwards. So I was really excited by the idea of doing it, but the idea that I could do it never occurred to me, because from what I'd seen, the stuff that I liked wasn't produced. I was totally wrong about that. You just had to do a little bit more searching. So I was really put off by the idea of doing it sort of for other people that I wasn't playing with. And then I saw the Uncaged call for writers and I was like, this is cool. I'd love to play something like this. I'll send off my thing. And I never expected to hear about it ever again. I was like, oh, this is a cool thing. I'm excited to kind of spread the word about it. I'll never be in it. And then I was. And then I was just like, oh, I actually really enjoy this.
I'm curious. So with the Uncaged application, did your original pitch, did it change much, or was it quite true to the...
No, it was expanded upon vastly, but the crux of it kind of stayed the same. So without spoiling the adventure, because you don't play it, basically I think the brief in the pitch, the call for pitches was inverting the origin stories specifically of female monsters, because there are quite a lot of them, and a lot of them have maybe less than feminist origin stories. And so I just went through the monster manual, because I was like, I've noticed this, but I've just kind of went, whatever, this is going to ruin my enjoyment if I engage too much. So I just let things slide. So I went through the monster manual and I read the Harpy origin story, which is you get all of this stuff about this elven god and she annoyed him in some way. You never actually learn her name.
Yeah.
And then she was cursed to become a harpy, and that's where harpies come from. And I was like, well, that seems... You're going to put her in the book, give her a name. And I just got quite annoyed by it. So I wrote my little pitch of that I would give her a different story and, it would all be, it would be a twist on that. And so that's what I did. I was like, well, that was cathartic, if nothing else. I've written my little that was just a change and sent it away. And then it was included, and that was amazing. And since then, I've really gotten a kick out of, like, everyone wants to do a twist on fantasy tropes, but it's not necessarily doing a twist on the tropes. It's saying, how could these surprise me? And that isn't necessarily like a huge twist. It's just like a tiny tweak.
Yeah.
I really enjoy that. That's cool.
So actually, you kind of mentioned it before. So in kind of like your home games and your homebrew, you have a particular style that you at the time you couldn't necessarily find in other sort of products. Like, what would you say your style is exactly? Is it that sort of, as you mentioned?
It's not. It's easier to say what it isn't, and what turns me off specifically about a lot of stuff that is just out there. It's not saving people who are helpless. Like, oh, I'm so great and you're so terrible.
Yeah.
Thank goodness for me. I don't like that. It feels like God, what state is the rest of the world in if this is what the ordinary people are like?
Yeah.
I quite like going to see like competent people and like saying, well, how could I actually be helpful? Not how could I decide how this is going to turn out? I get in the sort of a D&D game or whatever, you're meant to be the hero, but the way that the people you're saving and who you're often saving is, I was just a bit turned off by it. And then you can go through entire adventures sometimes and there not be a woman in it, and I would just be like, is this The Hobbit? Like, what are we doing? So it would just be like, and again, that was my own surface reading. I know that wasn't at all accurate, but if you do just go and quickly have a look, and that's the first thing you see, you just close the tab or walk out of the store or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of a bit turned off by it. So mine's just like making stories that had people in them like me and my friends who weren't, big shiny knights. I don't know any of those.
No, I think there's kind of the idea of was like including like in a world where the players are the quote unquote heroes, there should be other heroes. Or other people of like, not everyone's in dire need of, someone to waltz onto their farm and save their day. Sometimes they're perfectly content. Things are just, as they are.
Yeah, because otherwise you'd be walking along, to your next adventure and just see ruined villages left, right and centre because you didn't happen to be there.
Yeah.
There must be like competent mayors and competent townsguard, or else, how is the world functioning when the heroes aren't in it? I guess that comes from, I do a lot of sort of world building, sort of like fantasy novels and stuff, and the idea of like the world should exist even if your character wasn't in it, like kind of sticks with me, even if in a tabletop game that can mean you've prepped quite a bit of stuff they never see. But I like the idea just that the people that you're interacting with, the NPCs, are people, because otherwise you get into the whole like, there's a level of like adventurers and everyone else.
Yeah,
and that doesn't sit very well with me.
And that's why I also sometimes like the idea of like, sometimes people are like, oh, that's a really unique character idea that you bring to a table, like, I've got this wizard, he's a dad of 3, he's finished, he's paying off student loans, and this is how he's, it's like, oh, that's
student loans are massive. Spells are not cheap.
Exactly, and it's a case of like, it's like, well, no, this is probably a consequence of, and the world you have as a whole, that the fact that like this person needs to make a living somehow, and chances are there are, not every wizard has their own tower and lives a solitude life. Some of them, have whole families. Which I sometimes like I find it interesting that you bring up the idea of world building, because I think something that sometimes I struggle with is that when you look at just the spell list and just the implications of some of these spells just existing, of just and it just like I think the big one is like when you look at like resurrection spells. Yeah. And it's a case of like, well, there's a high monetary cost of them, but then it's like, well, I mean.
But if you'd lost someone, surely you'd make it your mission to raise that money.
Yeah.
Compared to the loss of a loved one, what's, thousands of gold? Nothing.
Like, would there be equivalent of like GoFundMe campaigns on like Wardy Street saying I've lost my husband? He was really great.
Yeah. Let's bring him back. I like that, but then I also get confused about the tragic family backstory that is like so ubiquitous, and I get why, because it's like a get out of responsibilities free card. You don't have to think about, oh, I'm being so reckless. What about my parents? What about my siblings?
Yeah.
That they're not there. You know, they were eaten by werewolves or something.
Yeah.
But then surely your quest, if you've lost your entire family and or village, is to go out and get someone who can do those spells.
Yeah.
It's not vengeance on the dragon. It's fixing it.
Yeah.
That confuses me as well. Like, create food and water. Like, if you're like a low-level druid who can do that, why are you not just going village to village, creating food and water? Like, what kind of monster are you?
Yeah, like that. I
These people.
Anything. All druids are evil. Just selfish druids out there.
I really don't like druids, and I've got no justification for it. It's an awesome class. It's just a thing. So in my head, I'm happy to go with all druids are evil.
No, and yeah, you know what? It's just like, even then, I think that we've stumbled across like an amazing adventure seed of like just like a decimated village where the adventures go out almost like one by one, resurrecting people.
Yeah.
To sort of like, you know, it's like a base builder essentially. And as you're okay, well, do we want to resurrect the blacksmith next, or do we want to go for like the? That's a pretty cool.
But then you've got the utility, you know, their productivity versus their worth as a person.
Oh yeah. I think I've immediately boiled them down to mechanics. That is.
But then that's great, because as a player, you're sat there in like a moral, you know, quandary.
Yeah.
Like, do I want the village to have a working forge, or do I want Timmy to have grandma back? Like, what do I want?
You know, there's going to be some edgy rogue saying, well, grandma probably doesn't have that much long, you know, life in her anyway.
I've already looted grandma's cabin on Cleaver. Yeah. But yeah, the implications of the spells, I think that's why, you know, the adventurers are kind of pitched as those heroes.
Yeah.
Kind of explain that, look, these are like rare abilities, that everyone who studies at a magical school isn't going to become a wizard. They're just going to become a scholar, and that's fine. Every weirdo in the woods isn't going to become a druid. Like, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
But then again, surely if you've got those abilities, even like level 1 abilities, world changing, and they're just running after kobolds or whatever.
Yeah, I'd like to. I think as well. Like, I think I'm gonna have a look through the spell list again and just maybe highlight some of like the potentially society breaking spells. Yeah. And I think just like a document just talking about like, okay, well, this is how like realistically they would be used if people, like, there were a good number of people with these abilities. Yeah. Because they kind of make sense. Then thank you for indulging me in that tangent of like,
it's a fun tangent. I like a tangent.
But to kind of bring it back to you and the like creative process, then you also mentioned that I believe you've also written for some Adventure League as well. Yes,
I did. That was an outlier as far as creative process goes, because it's very structured in what you have to produce. But then there's also like huge gaps where you actually do have to create and think of quite a lot. Which was a bit of a challenge, because I tend to think of stuff and then shove it into the structure later, whereas that was the other way. Yeah. It's quite for obvious reasons, it has to be extremely structured. And then you have like, okay, there's an area, create it, and it's like, okay, so I can do that.
I guess, would you say, like, with the nature of your adventures before, was it very much, because there's two ways of, like, obviously you have, like, on one end of the spectrum you have the sort of like dungeon crawl, you have this is the room, this is the things in the room, and then the far end you have the sort of more, I guess, like sandboxy adventures, I guess. I can call them. Would you say you naturally feel more comfortable in the
sandboxy area, just because when I was running a homebrew game, but I didn't always have a lot of time to prep, and so I would just sort of write down things my players were speculating about and or scared of, and then that was kind of my prep. Like, oh my god, what if that guy was evil? Like, no. And like that, it was just easier to me. And the thing I love about tabletop RPGs is that it's like a collaborative storytelling element of it. It's not necessarily the combat of it, which D&D is very combat heavy, and that can be really fun, but it is like the collaborative storytelling of it. So I don't like to get too structured when I'm doing stuff for myself and at home. But then I do recognize, as someone who's using a product, that having it be structured in a way that is somewhat uniform is ideal, because I don't necessarily have loads of time to prepare and sort of translate a document into something I can work with.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something I've struggled with, but Adventures League was its own like cool learning thing, because again, it wasn't me coming up with something and then, you know, putting it into a structure. It was a structure that already exists.
Yeah.
Then I had to work around. And that was really cool and interesting.
I guess as well, because with again, like writing for Adventure League is a beast in itself, because it's intended to be, you know, at a game store, at these sort of like more sort of condensed, like I guess like ultra gamified experience. Like you know, you
could just drop in and out. It's not necessarily about the collaborative storytelling-ness of it, although of course you could do that.
Yeah.
If you had a regular group, but it is that I could just go to like New York and drop into Adventures League game, and it would be the same as the one in Newcastle where I live. So naturally it's a bit different.
Yeah. So
but I really like that.
Yeah. So I was going to kind of build on, like tuck into that. And so what are some of the things that like you kind of learned from like writing in this sort of particular format?
That I could do that, because like
yeah.
I'm averse to kind of too much structure as a person. I'm quite chaotic. But I did actually really like it, and it was a lot. Looking at it at first, it was really daunting. I was like, oh my gosh, like I've never looked at adventures this way before. Like, it's always been the complete opposite way. But then actually when I got into it, there was a lot of room, and that's actually what I like about writing this kind of stuff in general, because even though I've written a structure and the sort of this is what happens and this is what happens and these are the monsters, there's so much room to do your own thing. And it was the same with writing that stuff. So learning that I can do that and that structure isn't the worst thing in the world was a good lesson.
Is it something that like from after sort of finishing the Adventure League title, have you kind of like kept that structure in some of like your future, or have you kind of?
Yeah, I've got a few things that I'm writing at the minute. I mean, 2020 means I haven't actually finished any of it, but some of it was really useful. Some of it was just so like detail intensive that I didn't find it helpful, but I understand that other people will. But definitely like coming up with the overarching thing first, which isn't necessarily what I would always do. I would start, and then I would say, okay, well, what possibly could happen next, and what could possibly happen next. But the kind of solid structure, I saw the value in that in a way that I hadn't really considered before. So again, it was doing things really differently, although it was daunting and quite stressful at the time. I actually did get quite a lot from it, and I have pinched bits here and there, because being structured is helpful. Who knew?
Yeah, you know, for some people and stuff like that. So then I guess like, okay, so Adventure League being like the outlier then, in like your like day-to-day, well, I guess they like day-to-day like adventure work, if we can call it that.
Yeah, the adventures that I write every day. 365 of them a year.
But is where with Uncaged, it kind of came from like, you know, a position of like, I want to, again, I dislike this harpy origin so much. Where like some of your other ideas, where do they kind of stem from?
So sometimes if there's like a call for contributors, so for example, the seasonal anthology, the Book of Seasons, that's what it's called. It was write adventures around the seasons, and I think it might have been that vague. So that was really exciting to me, because I was like, oh my gosh, what are my favorite seasons? What do they make me think of? And then it's going through and saying like, does this exist? How much work is it to make this exist? Can I be bothered to make this exist? Because some things are really like making monsters and anything that's a lot of like numbers and stuff is very time consuming for me, particularly. Figuring out the challenge rating and make sure it's balanced, like that is very time consuming, and I don't always have the time. So I'll just find something that is adjacent and that still works, or I'll think, actually no, it has to be exactly like this, and then I kind of fall into a rabbit hole of making a tiny idea around so I said, okay, autumn makes me think of Halloween, makes me think of vampires, makes me think of blood sacrifice, makes me think of, and it's like a little like falling downstairs of ideas until you end up with something that isn't maybe anything like my original idea. And so my fall adventure for Book of Seasons was hags who were requesting blood sacrifice from a village, and to get them, like, the village was under the impression that it would get them through winter. Obviously it would not, because the hags are evil. And then the spring one, that makes me think of the Fae for some reason, so it's really chaotic and whimsical, and it's really just, again, it's not a structured, I'm going to sit down and do a really neat structured brainstorm session, and it's not that at all for me. So I did the RPG Writers Workshop just because I was so curious as to, like, how other people did it, and I do not do it like that. I was like, I went through and some of it was so useful, and I was like, I'm gonna think of that, like, next time I get stuck. But I was just like, oh my gosh, some people are this organized. This is alien to me, like, completely. So the free association thing works for me if I have an idea. So, or if it's a very broad thing. If it's really specific, so there's a book coming out quite soon called Scientific Secrets of Icewind Dale. And that had to be a sort of winter-based phenomenon that you based a monster on that had to have a scientific citation to go with it. And so that was a lot less free association, because it had to be a thing that exists. So I had to go back and think of all the cool wintry stuff I've seen when I'm vaguely watching nature documentaries. So that was a totally different thing again. And then when I'm coming up with stuff on my own that isn't for a call for adventures, I think of stuff that I would find useful. So what I always struggled with when I was DMing, I haven't for like a year, but was if my players go somewhere that wasn't necessarily planned, so they go to a house and, oh, there's a library in it, what books do I find? I'm like, there's a biography of a male man. Like, I just don't know what to say. So it's like, hey, here's one of the things I'm working on at the moment is a sort of a random table of, like, various tomes and magic items that you'd find in a library, or if your wizard is looking for magical books, what else might they find that's not as useful, but would they feasibly find? Things that I would find useful for whatever I was playing, because that always comes up that I haven't thought of something, and then I'll think, oh my god, they're going to a market, they're going to a library, they're going to the seaside.
I don't
know.
I
craft things.
It's like players and books. I don't know what it is about players. They find a book and their instinct is to, regardless of where they are, I'm just going to read it now. I'm just going to flick through it now. It's like, you're like, now's not the best time to read.
Broken in. It's not the time.
But they're just like, no, I'm going to read through it. I want to find out, what's the plot. And it's like, okay, well, in 10 minutes you can summarize it's about, and those sort of like products are incredibly useful, because I think like books in particular feel like a very like topic that comes up a lot, that like,
because I've just started playing. I'd never played a wizard before, and I'm playing one, and I was like, oh my gosh, she needs to find a lot of books. Like, this should come up more. Why hasn't it come up more? So I'm very book focused right now. But there's so many other things, like names of NPCs. I was so happy when Xanathars put that random table in the back for naming things. Otherwise, they just all get like Bob and Tracy and like unfantasy names. The first thing I think of.
It's weird. My go-to is Keith, and I don't know if that's the thing. But actually, I did want to mention that, or bring it around to like the almost like the what did you call it? The rape, like the waterfall, technique of like I'm very much the same, in which I like the way I come up with ideas is quite mixed. That I found that sometimes just working with like a prompt, like you mentioned, like just seasons being quite as vague as that, was I think, what was it? Inktober comes around, and they have like a prompt every day. I think last year that's one of my first products I did, is I took every day's prompt, and I tried to sort of turn that into like a small sized encounter. And it's like, even with like the idea of like I don't know if the prompt is like skull. You can you can work a lot with it, and it's that idea of like, just let your mind go. It doesn't need to be completely structured. You can just let your mind wander. But it's interesting how how both, like, again, to be very meticulous and planning almost step by step, and also just completely freeform, both work.
Yeah.
And you come away from the end and going, like maybe I should do more of that, but then it's like, well, that also worked, and it's like, it's, you know, whatever gets the words out, it kind of.
Yeah. Well, my day job is advertising, so I think I'm quite used to having to come up with ideas sometimes incredibly quickly.
Yeah.
And not being afraid of them being terrible at first, because you just can't afford the self-consciousness. There just isn't time for it. And I think that has helped me a lot, just the sort of natural resilience to having a deadline and having to just get over myself, because Mel, there isn't time for this.
Yeah.
Get it down. Doesn't have to be good now, it will be.
Throwing all the pasta at the wall, seeing what sticks.
Yeah, really, it is. And so that, I think, has helped a lot. And obviously that's just get a job in advertising isn't great advice. But
no, I didn't think that was going to be your takeaway. But if there's anyone listening, you're like, oh, I should stop applying for them.
But yeah, just get over yourself is quite good advice, because you will hold yourself back more than anything else.
Yeah.
It's a good lesson I've learned, not necessarily from, I don't think I would have done anything for tabletop had I not had my job, because like naturally I'm quite a sort of cautious person.
Yeah.
But the idea that I, you know, have just had to get over myself for my job has helped quite a lot with creating for this, because, and again, I think it helps you come up with stuff that isn't in the sort of the mainstream of ideas. I mean, the mainstream of ideas is great, and I will defend to the death that you all meet in a tavern, because that's a great way to start, and I'll fight anyone who says otherwise.
I mean, like, some of my best nights have been in a pub.
Exactly, right? Like, where else are you going to meet a load of random people? Like, you know, meeting in a tavern, good way to start a campaign, end of. That's the takeaway. But I think as well, not second guessing your first idea is a really good way to get out of that and produce stuff that maybe people haven't seen before, and not having self-consciousness of, oh my god, what if this isn't good, has been quite useful, I think, for me.
Yeah, and I must admit, it sounds like, again, like your approach of sometimes finding a niche, or just like writing for your table, essentially, or things. Again, things is something that like a good number of creators have kind of also echoed, which I think is, I mean, chances are if you're sat at your table, like behind your DM screen going, I really wish I had X, chances are that there's probably at least like, you know, a good handful of people also in that same situation. Yeah. So
and they're just, and again, like, even if I'm sat there thinking, God, I wish I had a list of names or pubs or whatever, even if that already exists, it might not be the type of names or items that I think, oh, this is great, but I could use something a bit more out there. Mine isn't quite such a serious campaign. I'd love, you know, I once did a whole city, again, panicking. All of the pubs were named after yoga poses.
Nice.
It was like the Happy Baby. And
in terms of yoga poses, I only know the, I was about to say, I only know the upwards dog, downwards dog?
There is upward dog and downward dog.
Okay, fair.
There's a Happy Baby. There's a corpse pose, so there's just a pub called the Corpse. And it was great, and I really enjoyed that, but I know that wouldn't necessarily fit at other tables, because it's not the most serious.
I mean,
but again, that's why it's so good that if I think I want a list of pub names, and I do a slightly silly one, that's great for some tables, not so great for others.
And I suppose like in the sense of like, you know, taking books, taverns, and these like regularly occurring things, there's almost like no end to the possibilities, and the sort of the spectrum of like ultra serious, like, you know, going down to like the detail of, you know, how much I don't know, like, as I say, how much each drink is on the menu, but we all know most adventurers are just slapping a gold down on the table and going, please take it, I don't want change.
There's no time.
I don't want the coppers, please, just take the gold.
My bag is so full of coppers, just keep them.
Yeah. No, it's, I must admit, I lose track of the economy quite quick. And I think most adventurers go, once they get up to that point of like gold, they're just like, I'm just going to, you know.
It costs some money, goodbye. Yeah.
But then, so I guess like to get a little bit like deeper into like the nitty gritty, then is like when it comes to like your writing, like do you have like a favorite part and like a least favorite part that kind of?
The initial idea generating bit is always really exciting, because inevitably there are lots of possibilities. The thing that I enjoy and don't enjoy has been writing that in a way that's useful for someone else to access. So if I wrote just a bunch of notes, I would know what that meant.
Yeah.
You know, someone 5,000 miles away who's downloading it from DMsGuild would not. So writing it in a way that is accessible, that accounts for all the possibilities, because I really, really try. I know it's impossible, because once it counters your players, you may as well just throw it away. Yeah. But really trying to kind of account for all possibilities. So in one of my first adventures, I was quite proud of the fact that I put in a sort of a fail-safe. If they didn't go with either side and both got away, this is what happens. And the villagers are just a bit like, why are you here? Like, but it was in there, and what XP could be awarded, what treasure they might still get, and that kind of thing. Because I both like and am very challenged by trying to account for all possibilities, so that people don't feel like a bit stressed that their players haven't done what the adventure says they might. Yeah, that is quite stressful for me, and that's ridiculous because it's a game. But like, if they go, oh, we're just gonna go look at this house, and I'm like, oh my god, like there's nothing here for that. Yeah. Like, I really don't like it. So I really try and cover as many bases as possible, and that is both very difficult. But it is quite fun to go to my friends and say, you know, look, if you're in a D&D game and this and happened, what would you do next? And they never answer the same thing, but you do get like themes. Yeah. I would get very far away from that, or I would investigate that, or I'd go and get help, or whatever it might be. So I dislike it because it's really hard to make that compact and concise. Yeah. But I enjoy it because I like the idea that it's more useful to someone. And it provides a better experience.
It's such a difficult balance because you could run and literally pad a book with every possible like adventure, and like if like the moment you sort of say, okay, well, this is a small village, and then you go, okay, well, I could describe every building in the village because it may come up, and it's like, how do you balance that between like, you know. I was asked, like, have you come up with like a general like good rule of thumb that kind of helps you, like, or is it just literally going to like your friends and just be like, okay, well, I've kind of.
Yeah, it's like I try and be broad as well. So if the players are heading in this direction, this happens no matter what. Like, it seems like they're kind of making their own decisions, but either way, they end up in this forest. Yeah. However they get there, that's their business. But this is what happens. Yeah. So that's quite a good way of doing it, because I don't, as a player, like feeling like I have to do something. Like when you're first starting, it's like, well, the game is telling me I should go and investigate this, so that's fine. Yeah. But after that point, I don't like it so much. So it is a difficult balance, but I think it's just speaking to my friends, seeing if there's anything I hadn't thought of, and then making sure it all fits and that everyone gets where they need to be for the adventure not to be, like you say, 4,000 pages long.
I mean, it is very unlike the nature of the adventure, but like, yeah, as you kind of mentioned, having those sort of like, I guess like you have the points where like where it opens up, and then obviously ensuring you have like the convergent points where you can eventually bring things back together, because otherwise you will have like an infinitely spreading out of like what could happen. I like it is a fun balance, and I think like, especially like when it comes to putting an adventure in front of an editor, I think that sometimes always a good like check to like, if they're asking like, you know, is this needed, or you know, generally is a good rule of thumb. Like small things I like to try and do is I do try and like, anytime I mention a character, if possible, I do give them a name, because I think that's at the very least.
Bob effect. Yeah.
If you can say that, you know, there's you know, it is tempting saying, oh, you know, there's 4 guards at the manor. It's 4 more words to be like, you know, this is their names, and then it stops that eventual, because you know, one, they're going to try and break into the manor and they're going to get caught, and then the first question they're going to ask is, what's your name? Of like this guard who stopped them in the middle of the street. It's just, you know,
and then it's weird for the guard to go, it's like, you should know your name. Your name should like at least.
What is it? The guard there is getting heckled by the people who've just broken in.
You don't even know your name, idiot.
It's like, I feel again. You know what? That's like a nightmare of mine to like have someone approach me in the street, ask me my name, and for me to forget my name and then just harass me. Yeah, you know, I'm coming around to the idea that maybe the adventurers are the bad guys here. I think this is.
I mean, as a DM, I think it can sometimes feel that way. You know, I don't like the combative DM, trope.
Yeah.
But sometimes you're just like, oh my god, just cross the river, please. Love it. You're going anyway. I get to decide. It's where you're going to end up, so you may as well just do it. Yeah. Players as bad guys. I'm on board.
So I guess as well, are there any sort of particular like adventure design tips that you maybe have, or anything that you just like, you like the little seasoning on top that you kind of always like to try and include?
I always like, as a player, I always like weird treasure, and I just feel like it really adds to it if it's not just, oh, you found some gold unaccountably in this owlbear's cave. Yeah. Like I always try and make it like somewhat relevant. And I'm a huge fan of really stupid magic items, like the Cloak of Billowing or the Wand of Smiles and stuff, like the things they put in Xanathars, because they don't actually add much to the player's power, but they really enjoy them. Yeah. And like that's the point at the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned. It's meant to be fun. Mm-hmm. So, just throw stuff in. And I also am not stingy with magic items, but I always put in as an option for DMs, because I'm aware that not all DMs feel that way. So I'm always just like, they could also potentially find the following, or roll 3 times on this table, or whatever. Give the players stuff. I feel like that's a good, keeps everyone happy, and it makes the game more interesting, which is the point.
I think as well, so that's like in terms of magical items, that's something that I've definitely tried to do with, so I've been writing, so I think, was it, so this product potentially will come out the day after this is released. Again, this is gonna, I'm gonna have egg on my face if I don't finish in time. So I'm not gonna date myself too much. But I did a product which was Baldur's Gate items and encounters, which was essentially each encounter had an item attached to it. Yeah. And I think it is a really good way to spruce up like both social and combat encounters, just by giving monsters a unique item that they can somehow use, or and not being afraid to kind of throw these things at the player to let them kind of run with. Because I think I like, I'm trying to think of like some of the cooler ones, and even just like kind of repurposing abilities. So I think one of the ones that I've made recently is the idea of, it's called a hermit's hat. And it's a hat that essentially kind of gives you the ability of, a turtle, of like when they can go in their shell.
Oh, right. So you just go in the hat.
Yeah, it's like you pull the hat out, and it's weaker because obviously, like, you don't want to just turn everyone. Yeah, it's the idea of like encountering a bandit who works for the Xanathar's Guide, and their instinct to any sort of combat encounter is just to sort of pull up their hat and just hide with it. Which I think, again, it's rather than, you find 4 bandits in an alleyway, it's a little sort of sprinkle on top.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes, like, just including a magic item like that can add something to the game. So I had an NPC, sort of, basically they had an item that was a bit like, it just paralyzed the person that they used it on if they failed to save. And the ranger in our party became fixated on it, and that was his new mission, that he wanted one of those. Yeah. And that was like a whole, I would never have planned for it, and I was like, okay, yeah, he told you where he got it, and it was a cave somewhere, and like, I just had to make something up, but then it became this whole thing. Yeah. And the potential for them to add stuff to the game, I don't worry about players becoming overpowered, because you can always bump up the monsters if you want, but it just adds so much like richness that you might not even expect when you throw it in there. I just didn't want, it was like a fail-safe in case they didn't catch the guy, the NPC would. Yeah. But then actually all of a sudden they had this whole new side quest that took up like 4 sessions.
I think the when it comes to like adventure writing and stuff like that, it's like you never really know like what power level the players are coming in, because like even though like we're writing them as one shots, 9 times out of 10 I think they're being incorporated into like larger campaigns that kind of have so it's like you just kind of throw things out there, and if for whatever reason this small paralyzing wand accidentally breaks, a world of someone's, then, they can have, it could be an interesting campaign where someone else hears about the wand and then goes out of their way to try and steal it. They look like plot holes, but you just you keep digging.
Plot opportunities. That's
I do like that, an optimistic spin on it. It's plot opportunities.
Another thing actually I always try and do is include possibilities for because again I agree, 80% of the time I think these are being put in if the DM hasn't had time to prepare something for the campaign. I try and put in other threads, so at the end of this adventure, the local lord overhears what's happened and comes to you for help, or you saw this weird thing and you found a map or whatever, because it just makes things easier and the players can latch onto it or not. I just really like the idea of a story seed that could go anywhere, but it's just thrown in there extra. It's 20 extra words, but it could be sessions and sessions of game time potentially. And
I think this is actually something that I remember when I read through Waterdeep Dragon Heist, the Enchiridion. I think I've said that right. The one thing I do kind of like about them is they do leave those sort of hooks open. Which I think when I was reading, it can feel like it's two-sided, because one thing you're I wish they'd just give me a little bit more detail, but then on the flip side it's well no, I mean I can run with this now, this can be whatever I want it to be. And the same way of trying to squeeze, I don't know, try and just incorporate, there you go, that's a much better word, incorporate that into your own adventure design. And
one thing I saw another thing in what it was the Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, the Critical Role setting. One thing that Matt Mercer did was, for each city there were story seeds, so a list of them in each district. I thought that was great, because again it was a bullet point. But if you get stuck, if your players get somewhere and think, well, what next? Well, actually there's this mysterious plant that the person with highest perception notices, or whatever. It's so easy, it takes no additional time. And to be honest, I think they, controversial opinion, add more to adventures and games and stuff like that than the huge bulk of all the crunchy number stuff.
And as I say, to kind of add on, I'm a huge fan of gossip tables. And especially if you have a multi-part campaign set in one thing, just have if they're at this part of the chapter or this part of the chapter, some people maybe just be chatting about this, and it's it's just it's like I said, it's you kind of aware that it's the DM's way of going, hey guys, you've lost the plot a little bit here. Here's
you happened to overhear. Oh no! This terrible thing has happened. Says a very articulate guy walking past you.
Or two very loud nattering grannies. They're just they want everyone to hear anyway. So
they do.
So I guess I'm kind of curious then. So with being involved in some I guess hugely successful anthologies, have you had much feedback, or have you had a chance to sort of hear from people who have run your adventures?
I occasionally get tweets from people, especially because Uncaged Volume 1 is by far the best-selling thing I've been involved in. 80 cajillion people or something ridiculous. That's not a real number. I occasionally get tweets, because in my little bio it was come and say hello at Miss Box on Twitter. And occasionally people do say, I've just played your adventure, my adventurers resolved it like this, and none of them have ever been the same. It's great. I really love that. There's been some comments on DMsGuild that were less great. I think I mentioned this in the Albacon panel. Someone's there's too many lesbians in this anthology. What's the appropriate amount of lesbians? What's our lesbian quota? But mostly it's been really great. Another interesting thing about doing Adventurers League was there is a playtest aspect that is a lot more comprehensive than any other playtest I'd done, because obviously they've just got people they can send it to. And then I got loads of comments back, and that was, some of it was a bit again, in my day job I get a lot of not positive feedback, so I'm used to it, but some of it was a little bit harsher than I'd had previously, but it was really useful, because I was you're right, that is rubbish, I should change that. I'll just take that out. But mostly it's been really positive, people telling me like how they've done something and how their players have done it, and that's always really exciting. I like that.
Yeah, I think again, yeah, I think I've the few times that I've sort of gone out and sort of play testing, it's a daunting experience. It's just because it's like there's it's we kind of mentioned it before. Like you can't predict how a table is going to respond to and it's like the idea of like okay, and you're putting a lot of trust in the DM to run. And again, it's like it's certain things can be misconstrued, and you never know whether that's just. Not to blame the playtesting DMs or anything like that. It's like it's trying to find that balance of like, okay, well, where can I improve clarity, or where is
My favorite one was I'd written an adventure and I playtested it once online with some people. And then I took it to my like regular like weekly table.
Yeah.
The DM was like, needs a bit of break. I was like, I'll just playtest this, it'll be fine. And the way they resolved this adventure that I just couldn't have planned for if I'd had a month to sit and think of every possibility. They basically staged Live Aid, like to kind of raise awareness of this hidden thing and like shame these people. And I was just like, okay, I need like an elven Geldof. That's what I need. I need all of that. And I stood there. I was like, this is my adventure. I wrote it. And I just feel like it's so insufficient for this situation.
It's like, it goes back to the idea of like, the GoFundMes and stuff like that.
Basically it was like, how can we raise awareness of this? It's like we could start like a whisper campaign, like as an NPC, I was like, we could do like a whisper campaign. They were like, no, we're going to do a concert.
I'm going to guess there was probably either one or two bards in that party.
There were two bards.
There you go. No, yeah.
I should have really guessed when there were two bards, but they were just very useful, inspiring bards the whole adventure, and then right near the end, Live Aid.
Yeah. No, I know it probably wasn't your intention, but I can't imagine a better way for that to go, really.
I was like, what I've actually written is rubbish now. This every adventure should end like this. A musical number.
So I guess like it's like to summarize your like writing experience then, is there any like one particular lesson that you wish you kind of learned a little bit earlier in the process, or I
guess I wish I'd been less scared of like making my own monsters and stuff, because balancing that can be really daunting, but I've done it a few times really recently. It's not that hard. I mean, it's not easy. It's not simple, I guess. It's quite complicated, but there's so much potential, and I really wish I'd done that sooner, because I actually really enjoyed it. But everything else, I feel like I'm quite lucky that my day job is what it is. Yeah. Because a lot of the get over yourself, listen to feedback, but don't take it personally, blah, 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 all of that I kind of already had. But don't be scared of making monsters doesn't come up in advertising. So
because I suppose it is the sort of like the in the same way, like obviously writing an adventure, the sort of the mechanical crunch you come across is probably it's not the same as like writing a subclass. I think you read the line of like the mechanical stuff are probably like items or monsters. Those are the ones that you kind of have to
like
play around
balanced
with.
Encounters, and that's it.
Yeah. And I think the DM's like the Dungeon Master's Guide does have like a pretty nice section in like towards the back of like creating your own monsters.
Yeah.
But I think again, like taking like the way I've kind of sometimes approached it is just taking a monster you like, and then just almost like pick and mix. You take out the abilities you don't like, you find other abilities, and sort of bring them in, and that in itself kind of allows for like a unique concoction.
Yeah, it's quite just find like picking a challenge rating and mixing the bits all about is. Yeah, but then starting from scratch, I'd never done, and I did recently, and it was like, oh, I did it. I think this works.
Was this for the scientific? Nice.
So that was I quite enjoyed it, and I think the crunchy aspect of the game is the bit that's always daunted me a little bit, because if you get it wrong, it's just not really usable. But then I was like, well, if you get it wrong, you do it again. Yeah. Like, that's fine. But because it isn't something I've done a lot of, it's something that I wish I'd done sooner, because I would have done a lot of it by now.
And worst comes to worst, what is it? You kill the party. That's that's what they can start new characters.
Real.
Yeah,
it's not in real life.
Actually, I had a conversation about this the other day. That I think more tables need to be open at the idea of the characters dying. Yeah. I think more people should. That's one thing. More people should die.
More people should die.
Well, that's going to be the trademark for this podcast.
More people should die.
More people should die. No, I don't have a smooth segue for that, so I'm just going to this is when we have the swipe fade into the next section. Do you looking to the future and towards the community as a whole? Is there do you have a dream project or a sort of project that is always off in the distance that you kind of one day?
My dream project right now is to finish anything. This year, I don't think I'm the only person struggling, but I just I've started so many things, been really excited, and then sort of I thought, what's the point? The world's ending. My God. But I am pretty excited about my Tome of Tomes, is what I've called it, my book collection.
Yeah.
Because I think that's pretty cool. So I'm excited to finish that. And then in the future, I sort of started last year a book about it was a huge collaborative thing that kind of had to be postponed indefinitely, and it was basically a response to some of the responses that Uncaged Anthology had gotten about forcing inclusivity in the community, and it was basically here's why it would be good to do that, and here's examples of how to do that, and it was going to be a project of just awesome stuff that you can include and how to do it well, to kind of avoid seeming homogenous. It needs a lot of work, but one day I'll figure out how to do it. I will find the time somewhere, and I'll do that, and that'll be cool, because I think that is something that I would enjoy doing, and some people won't like it, and that's fine, they don't have to get it, but I feel like some people would find it useful, and that would be cool.
And no, especially it's the sort of product that I can imagine seeing just being as useful for other authors as well. Because it's the sort of thing that, again, if you're not necessarily I'm trying to choose my words. If these are if there's elements of inclusivity that you want to ensure that you kind of
do right,
then that sounds like the best way to go about it. Then just
that was the idea, because I think people feel defensive when people say, oh, things aren't very inclusive. And you're not doing it because you're a bad person, and most people recognize that. So you're not doing it because there are no good examples of how to do it. And that's a sort of self-perpetuating thing. So it would be cool to do that, but it's just finding the time to do it justice and do it right. And I will do it one day. Next time there's a pandemic and I'm prepared. And I won't panic as much.
I was can you not put that energy in the air of next time there's a pandemic?
If I don't panic as much next time, I can use those 6 months of nothing to produce all sorts of stuff.
So I guess to pivot the question slightly with Tome of Tomes, how many books are you thinking of cramming into them?
I think at the minute there's 70.
Wow.
But I still haven't done because I want them at every level of rarity.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So there's common books, which are mostly useless, and some of them are the common items in Xanathars, where they're just fun and a bit. You wouldn't cry if you lost it, but it's fun to have. But then I'm working my way up to very rare and legendary, and I'm what do you do with a legendary book?
Yeah.
You just can't put it down. It's just so good. And then is that not just a really bad item to have?
Make it a pop-up book.
Everyone loves those.
It's that's legendary in itself. For a goblin, I think there's endless entertainment.
Or a very, very dumb barbarian. Hours of fun.
Witchcraft.
It does something amazing. So that's struggling my way through the higher item levels at the minute. And then I have to make it look nice and make sure it's balanced and all of that. But that's just forcing my way through that, because it's quite a fun thing, and it's a really good project. Because unlike an adventure or something like that, it's made of lots of little bits.
Yeah.
So I've just got half an hour, or if I'm on the bus, I can just be oh my God, a book that does this, and then that's another bit done.
And yeah, that's something that I quite like about like items or encounters is the fact that you small slight seeds and you can just sort of like run with them. No, awesome. Well, then I guess kind of like building from that, looking at like the DMsGuild community as a whole, or just again, not just the DMsGuild community, but like is there anyone like or like some people? I need to change that because my question is there anyone? But it's more likely. No, there could be more than one. Like you can't narrow it down to one person. That's what's so great about the question.
Yeah. So the two people that I've worked with, I think the most, and who I've personally gotten the most support from, are Kat Evans at Perpetual Gloom on the Twitter, and Alicia Furness. I can't remember her Twitter handle. That's terrible, but her name's Alicia Furness.
Yeah.
I've worked with them quite a lot. Worked on a project that had to be taken off the DMsGuild called Eat the Rich, but I've worked with them on several collaborations. They're really talented and really amazing and have helped me out of panics or like, oh my god, I'm stuck, what do I do with this? So many times. They've been great. So those are I'll keep it to those two. Before I just go through Twitter and just read everyone I follow.
Was it? So Eat the Rich has been reposted up on Drive-Thru RPG there, hasn't it?
Yes, it has, in little installments. So my adventure isn't up yet, but there are 2 so far. They're amazing. You should definitely go and check them out. And yeah, so they'll be released in little installments. So that's really cool.
It's kind of like it seems like, again, but at least in chatting to you and stuff like that, it sounds like the sort of like the people I've had on before who kind of say collaborations are amazing and stuff like that. I think you're kind of like the embodiment of the what the power of collaborations can sort of.
Yeah, but as well, like I think it's a collaborative game, or it should be.
Yeah.
I think the best way is if everyone's doing it together, and I feel like why wouldn't it be better and easier if you weren't just doing it all on your own? Some things are great on your own, and obviously there's amazing content produced by people on their own, but I feel like anything is just easier if there's more than one of you. Like,
I mean,
because no one's amazing at everything, and so I feel like do what you're really good at, and then find the people who are really good at what they do. Make something really amazing.
Yeah, I know. I think again, I'm kicking myself for not remembering where the sentiment came from. But yeah, the fact that Dungeons & Dragons, it's like collaborative. I was about to say communicative, collaborative to its very core. It's the collaborative storytelling thing. So it kind of makes sense that if you're making stuff for it, that too should be at least smidgen collaboration. Yeah.
Even if you just run it by someone, like so many times I've worked with these people on collaborations before, and then I've been doing something on my own. I just said, "Does this work?" And they're like, "Yes, no," or "What about this?" And it's just, it helps to have a person, even if it isn't like a formal collaboration. It helps to have like a sounding board who kind of knows what on earth you're on about.
Yeah, and I'm gonna put the energy out there. Like, if anyone listening I'm only well versed to talk about adventures, but if people want an adventure looked at, my DMs, they should still be open. I don't know if this is gonna I think I'll know that when this podcast is released, if my DMs if they just explode, that I can probably pinpoint to the exact moment that but give back to this community that's done.
It's a nice problem to have. A lot of people want your input. That's nice.
Yeah. And like that, I just goblin pop-up book.
That's the next project.
But no, so I guess to bring it to all a close then. So you mentioned like some of the stuff that you're currently working on, but I guess to kind of summarize, like what are some of the things you're working on? And second, like what's the best way to kind of keep up to date with, when they're being released and thrown out into the wild? Okay,
well, the thing that I am definitely going to finish, if it kills me, I hope it doesn't, is Tome of Tomes, because I'm excited about it, and it's sort of probably about 60-70% of the way there. So that's my next thing. I will not put a date on it, because this year, like an anvil will fall on me, or I'll trip into a cupboard to Narnia, or something will happen. So I'm not putting a date on it, but I am working on that. The best way to keep up with me, because I'm not organised enough to put anything anywhere else, is at my Twitter, which is @Missbox, MISSBOX. I will just tweet something there, and then there's a thread that I just add to. So my pinned tweet is a thread of everything I've done so far. And I'll update that occasionally with anything that's upcoming, or anything that I think's awesome that I'm not even involved in. I'll just whack that in there because I feel like people should see it. But that's the best way to keep up with what I'm doing.
Oh, fantastic. And yeah, well, yeah, again, so thank you so much for taking this time. Again, the hour has flown by.
Flown by.
As it is one to do. But yeah, so yeah, no, obviously your Twitter handle and all the links to your DMsGuild products will be in the description down below. I highly recommend people listening check them out. Otherwise, I've been Matthew Whitby. You can find me at Whitby Writes. Because that's something I do on occasion. And my very last question of the podcast is how do you end a podcast, Mel?
I don't end podcasts. I don't really end podcasts ever. But the one thing I've been doing recently to end a Zoom call, which is what this is, sorry to break it up, is talk about something stupid on the internet that made you smile today.
Oh, yes. So there was I shared a GIF that I saw of it was a beaver crunching on some lettuce. It had little hands and everything. It was just like munching on it. So,
that's so good.
Yeah, it's very cute.
Isn't that a great way to end things?
That's a great way to end. So,
I had one t-shirt that was it was one of the stupid, strangely specific geek t-shirts on Facebook, but it was the Mordor Fun Run. One does not simply walk. Made me laugh quite a lot.
That's what you need.
That was my stupid thing.
Oh, I like that. That's a very wholesome end. So no, thank you so much for listening, and bye.
Bye.